You're listening to Cars and Coffee, your local home for IndyCar, Formula One, and sports car racing news.
Here on 91.3 WHJE.
And now, here's your host, Nathan Ward. Hello, and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. I want to, before we get started, thank everyone for contributing to Riley-thon last week. We raised around $14,000, not quite hitting our goal, but again, we want to thank everyone for their generosity in donating just a little bit of their money to help change these kids' lives. Going right into some of these headlines, we had a really snooze-fest truck race yesterday at Atlanta, won by Kyle Busch. He takes his 68th career Truck Series win. He has now won a race in any of the top three NASCAR National Series every year since 2004, which is absolutely ridiculous. But my big gripe that I have with the two top Chevy teams in both the Truck Series and the O'Reilly Series, so that would be Spire Motorsports and Trucks and Junior Motorsports and Xfinity, they are kicking their full-time drivers out of their seats for several races a year so Cup drivers can race in their cars, and Junior Motorsports has an extra car. So it doesn't really make sense. Like, you're kicking Roger Carruth, Carson Kvapil, and actually, yeah, I think it's just those two for JRM, but you're kicking them both out to do for Cup drivers to race in their cars, but you're also using the 9 cars and All-Star car. No team needs 3 All-Star cars. That's my point. And both of the Spire Motorsports trucks were driven by Cup drivers at Atlanta, and they finished 1-2. But at least at least a Cup driver did not win the O'Reilly Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Instead, it was Sheldon Creed who finally gets off the list of most laps led without winning due to Ross Chastain turning Austin Hill in turn 3 of the final lap. Austin Hill saves it, but that causes the pack to break apart. Sheldon Creed comes out in the lead, and this absolutely broke the booth. If I could legally play the clip here, I would, but I don't know if I can. But Adam Alexander, the lead commentator for the CW's NASCAR coverage, went ballistic. Like, the whole final 2 laps of that race are so much fun to watch over and over and over again. And congratulations to Sheldon Creed for finally breaking through, and in the funniest way possible by taking advantage of the of his former teammate at RCR wrecking, and because if you go back to 2022 at RCR, Sheldon Creed was in the 2 car, Austin Hill in the 21. Hill, at every chance he got, essentially screwed over Sheldon Creed to win his own races, which I don't know the extent of team orders at RCR, but it is kind of a petty thing to do. Moving on to, we have NASCAR 2 Electric Boogaloo. We have another lawsuit. JGR, Joe Gibbs Racing, has sued Denny Hamlin's crew chief Chris Gabehart over allegedly stealing intellectual property. In this case, I believe setup files. And because they found setup files on his home computer as he was getting ready to leave JGR and move over to Spire Motorsports as the chief motorsports officer. So JGR is suing him probably for breach of contract and intellectual property theft, among other things. Brad Keselowski, who's still recovering from a broken femur suffered in a skiing accident over the offseason, will have Ford road course ringer Joey Hand on standby for next week's NASCAR Cup race at Circuit of the Americas. Keselowski was able to do these first 2 races at Daytona and Atlanta because they require a whole lot less pedal work than COTA does, and trying to drive a road course with a broken femur cannot be fun. So I'm leaning towards the option that Keselowski will let Joey Hand drive the car for that weekend just so he can focus on recovery and not risk breaking the femur again at a track that requires much more intense work with the pedals. Colin Brown will drive the Kaulig Racing Ram 1500 free agent truck at the Truck Series race in St. Petersburg that is supporting the IndyCar weekend. I'm super excited for the start of the IndyCar season next week. And moving over to F1, Audi, Mercedes, and Ferrari seem to be the potential favorites as engine and battery woes have affected pretty much the entire grid, most notably Honda, who have had, as I talked about last week with Oliver, they've had essentially a repeat of 2015, their season with McLaren. It's not looking good for Honda right now. Audi's engine is apparently so powerful it is melting through the bodywork. So I don't know if they're going to change the bodywork. They're probably going to have to if they don't want to literally burn through all of their engine covers. But Audi has a good engine, Mercedes has a good engine, Ferrari has a good engine, and Ferrari has that silly little rotisserie cooker rear wing, which I always find very funny. But other than that, F1-wise, I honestly do not know what to think with these new cars. These new cars do have a power problem because it's 50-50 combustion and electric power, and when that electric power runs out, you're slower than an F2 car, which is really dumb. But I have a feeling that they are going to change that for the sake of performance. I don't think they're going to let that slide. But we're just going to have to see when the cars roll up to Melbourne in like a month, I think, is when the season starts. But before we go into our major segment, here's how you can get in touch with the show if you want to join as a guest. Here's our Instagram.
Want to get in touch with the show? Head over to the Cars and Coffee Instagram page at carsandcoffee_WHJE and send us a message. That's at carsandcoffee_WHJE. I'll try to answer as many messages as possible.
Our big highlight of the week is the fact that the Le Mans 24 Hours entry list for 2026 has been released with 18 hypercars, 19 LMP2s split between the normal LMP2 class and the LMP2 Pro-Am class, and 25 GT3 cars from all across the world. Starting off with hypercar, you have your full 17-car full season entry list from the likes of Aston Martin, Toyota, Cadillac, BMW, Genesis, Alpine in their final year, Ferrari, and Peugeot. The only extra entry in hypercar is the number 101 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac, which is the IMSA at-large entry. So every year, IMSA gets one Le Mans entry to hand out to one of its GTP teams to send them to Le Mans. Usually, it's the GTP champion, but since Porsche Penske Motorsport won the championship last year and Porsche does not have a WEC program, they are not allowed to use that invite. So it has been handed at IMSA's discretion to Cadillac Wayne Taylor Racing, who will contest the race with the 18th hypercar, the number 101 Cadillac, with Ricky Taylor, Jordan Taylor, and Felipe Albuquerque. That's it for hypercar. No other extra entries. But I think what people have to realize is that even though there's a decrease in hypercar entries, if you told like 2020 me that there would be 18 top class cars at Le Mans in just 6 years from 6 years from that point where we had 5 LMP1s contest the 2020 race, and even then, like just 4 years later, we had 24 or like 23 hypercars contest the 2024 edition of the race. If you told 2020 me that fact, I would have exploded. Like, I had never known a World Endurance Championship like throughout my fandom with more than 8 cars in the top class. So having 18, anywhere from 18 to 20, we're probably going to have 20 next year if these hold up, and maybe even more if Porsche, Lamborghini, or Honda throw their hat into the ring. This is big. Like, even though the numbers have gone down over the last couple years, that is an absolutely ridiculous number of top class cars if you compare it to just 6 years ago. Moving on to LMP2, on my list here, I've actually split it into its separate classes like it is in the European Le Mans series of LMP2 and LMP2 Pro-Am. All 19 cars will use the same Oreca 07 Gibson car as usual. There really isn't that much going on here other than RD Limited, Romain Dumas' team, who's broken his own Pikes Peak record probably 5 times at this point. They are one of the Pro-Am entries with Fred Portad and Romain Dumas as the 2 confirmed drivers. They have to have a silver-rated driver to kind of bridge the performance gap between those 2. That's how the rules work. But other than that, United Autosports has 2 cars, 1 in each subclass. Inter Europol has 2. They're bringing their 343 car, which is their Asian Le Mans Series crew, even though they didn't get the invite. The Asian Le Mans Series invite, I think, it goes to CrowdStrike by Algarve Pro Racing. That's George Kurtz's team. The Rolex 24 winners, that's George Kurtz and Alex Quinn. I'd imagine Louis Delatraz is No, Louis Delatraz is not the 3rd driver because he is with AO Racing, who have secured their invite by winning both the European Le Mans Series LMP2 Pro-Am title and the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship LMP2 title. It's been a great year for AO, but if you go down to GT, they did not succeed in bringing their Porsche Rexy over to France because they were not able to convert their second LMP2 invite that they got from, I'm guessing, IMSA. They were not able to convert that to a GT3 entry, so I think IMSA passed it to, I believe, Inter Europol because they have an extra car. But LMP2, really the best part about LMP2 is that the racing's good because they're all the same car, but really nothing in terms of drivers so far. Most of the bronze drivers have been filled out because a lot of them are the team owners, or at least the main backers of the team, because they're all rich. But a lot of these teams have open second and third driver slots. Those probably won't get filled out until April or May. Most of the GT3 field is actually filled out, excluding the Heart of Racing team lineups and their 2 Aston Martins, and the most peculiar entry, I think, that actually made the race. We'll talk about the reserve list later. But the most peculiar entry that I think made the race is the number 2 TF Sport car. Now, TF Sport has its 2 Corvettes that it's running full season in the WEC. They also are supporting the 13 Autosport car. That's Ori Fadani, who is the best amateur driver in IMSA this past year. The 4th TF Sport Corvette is a partnership with Johor Motor Racing, which is Johor is a state in Malaysia, whose Sultan is the king of Malaysia. The Malaysian monarchy is a really weird system. They essentially elect each other. All the sultans of the different states elect one of their own as king every couple years. The son of the king of Malaysia, Prince Jeffrey Ibrahim, is the only confirmed driver at the moment. He is the amateur. I wouldn't be surprised if his brother, Prince Abu Bakr Ibrahim, is the second driver, which would lead to a 2 bronze driver lineup, which no other team has elected to go with. I wouldn't be surprised if the 2 brothers are in that car alongside one of their other drivers that maybe competed at Bathurst, like Jordan Love, not the quarterback Jordan Love, but he is a Corvette affiliated driver from Australia. That's my prediction for the TF Sport JMR car, but that I think is kind of a dark horse car because they've assembled very good lineups in the past, even with their amateur drivers being the 2 princes. They've still been incredibly fast with everyone in the car. Other than that, the only 2 Porsches of any kind in the field can be found in the GT3 class, the 2 Manti cars that are full season in the World Endurance Championship from DK Engineering and The Bend. That's Yasser Shaheen from Australia and James Cottingham from Great Britain. It's a bummer to not see Porsche there, but I'll take Roger Penske's word when he says they will be back before 2030, because if Roger Penske wants something done, he will get something done. The other interesting entries. So Kessel Racing is the GT World Challenge Bronze Cup champion team. So they are the way that works is the only reason that the Bronze Cup is the only class in GT World Challenge that gets a Le Mans invite is because it has the same driver structure as the GT class at Le Mans. You have to have an amateur driver, and that's what the Bronze Cup has in GT World Challenge. So Kessel Racing gets one. They actually get 2 cars. I think the other is it's the car guy car. It's Takeshi Kimura's team from Japan, but I think that's their European Le Mans Series car. I'm pretty sure. Racing Spirit of Le Mans, despite not running in WEC full-time, will have a car at the big race this year with their European Le Mans Series crew, Clement Matteo, Sebastian Bode, and Valentin Haseclo. Going back to the reserve list, there is one really peculiar entry that is third reserve. So the way the reserve list works at Le Mans is if a team withdraws from the main entry, cars get promoted from the reserve list in order of how they're listed. So first reserve is the GR Racing Ferrari for Michael Wainwright, who is currently serving a jail sentence for tax evasion, by the way. His team is first reserve. So say there's a team that can't make it, like from America, there's a team that can't make it over to France and they withdraw, and there's enough time before the race starts, they will elevate first the GR Racing car, and if there's another withdrawal, they'll elevate the Cetelar Racing LMP2 car, which that's their Asian Le Mans Series car. And if there's another withdrawal after that, they will elevate the number 56 Blackthorn Aston Martin, which has 2 confirmed drivers, interestingly. Giacomo Petrobelli, who is their amateur driver, and former IndyCar driver and soon-to-be NASCAR Truck Series one-off driver, Dario Franchitti. It's good to see Dario get back into more professional racing over the past few months, even though his car at the moment has not made the race. Of course, that can change. We are in February, and the race isn't for another 4 months. So a lot can happen in that time period, and there's still a very minute chance that Dario Franchitti and that Blackthorn Aston Martin team will be able to contest the race. Because, look at 2020. Even though that's because of COVID, the entire reserve list was exhausted in 2020, and we ended up with fewer than 62 cars because so many cars out of the main field withdrew that they went through the entire, I believe, 11 or 12 car reserve list, and even then more teams withdrew because of COVID. But anything can happen. They are third reserve, so they're still above 6 other cars, most of them being LMP2s and GT3s. No hypercars on the reserve list, thankfully, because really, there should be no hypercars on the reserve list. Every hypercar team that requests an entry that meets all the criteria should be able to enter the race. That is the headline class. More cars in the headline class is always better. But yeah, the two really interesting reserve list items are I imagine that the GR Racing car is reserved because their only confirmed driver is in jail. But I'm kind of surprised that it's not lower down on the list, even though Wainwright's sentence will end before the race, obviously. So I'm kind of surprised they aren't a bit lower, considering the circumstances of Michael Wainwright at the moment. But there's still a chance that we will see Dario Franchitti at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the Blackthorn Aston Martin, but it will have to be at the expense of 3 other teams that are already in the main race. And considering all of these teams are very solid and have the ability to travel, have the ability to air freight or ship all their cars on container ships, I don't think that'll be an issue. But if we get into the test day, I think if you have a crash on the test day, you might be replaced with a reserve entry. I'm not sure how that works, but once you get into the practice weekend, they will not replace a withdrawal with a reserve entry, just because it would take too long for the reserve entries to get there. And by race day, a lot of them would have withdrawn from the reserve list because they're like, yeah, we're not going to make the field. But those are my thoughts on the Le Mans entry list for now. I will return to this topic once some of the driver slots get filled out and talk about some of the more interesting lineups and who I think could have the best chance to win Le Mans this year. And that will be after the first couple rounds of the WEC have concluded, so I can get a gauge on how each car performs and which lineups are looking pretty solid. So that will most likely be around the end of the school year, probably early May before the Indy 500 preview show. When we come back, our Race Cars For You feature listing is one of my favorite Australian domestic racing cars, the Mark IRC GT, and that will also lead into our final segment of the day. But before we get to our Race Cars For You feature listing, we're going to go to a quick song break. So here is Good Times, Bad Times by Led Zeppelin. You're listening to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. We will be right back.
Don't go away. Cars and Coffee will be right back on 91.3 WHJE. Hi, if you're listening to this, that means you're listening to a replay of today's show. I just want to say thank you for listening and make sure to subscribe to the This Week in Racing YouTube channel so you never miss another episode of Cars and Coffee, along with highlights from your favorite motorsport series. If you're listening on the WHJE website, go to youtube.com/@TWIRvids. If you're listening to this on YouTube, just click the button below. Thank you so much for listening. Now, let's get back to the show. We now return to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE.
Hello, and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. Our Race Cars For You featured listing of the week is one of my favorite Australian domestic racing cars, the Mark Cars IRC GT. This one is in Chevy Camaro trim, which leads to the coolest fact about this car is that it can be converted into essentially 4 different cars, all with different bodies. This car is the pinnacle of Australian domestic motorsports, courtesy of Mark Cars. This car has most recently completed, or this kind of car, not this chassis specifically. This car has most recently competed in the invitational class of the Bathurst 12-hour in the hands of 111 Racing. It can even be converted from a Chevy Camaro SS body, like the example in this listing, into a Mercedes 663 AMG, a Ford Mustang, or an Aston Martin DBR9. All of these cars use the same GM LS3 6.2-liter dry sump V8, which this thing is one of my this was my favorite car from the Bathurst 12-hour. I'm glad it made it to the end. Unfortunately, it didn't have much competition. Usually in the past, Mark Cars enters a whole fleet of cars, including their Mark II V8, which is based on a Ford Mustang Coyote engine, and it looks like a Ford Mustang. Mark Cars has also manufactured several other cars for Australian domestic racing, most notably a Ford Focus and Mazda 3 that are based off the same frame, and a Coyote V8 powered Ford Mustang, which was essentially the precursor to the Mustang GT3 in spirit. All of these have been fan favorites at the Bathurst 12-hour for several years and have had major cult followings. And I really don't blame them. This is an absolutely gorgeous car, and you can get it for $255K, and it's probably one of the only ones that's in the U.S. Most of these are still in Australia, because that's where they compete. They compete in a very small series that essentially follows the V8 Supercars Championship around Australia and New Zealand. These things should really be, not broken out of Australia, but they need to have their time in the sun, in other series, because they're so cool. These cars are too cool to not have in a major series, and I'll talk about that later when I talk about possible changes to the Bathurst 12-hour format. But these cars are, to me, they're I don't know how to compare it to another event that has a special variety of car. The Nürburgring has pretty much everything. This is like the Dacia Logan is to the Nürburgring. Just a little itty-bitty hatchback that goes around the Nürburgring every year during the 24-hour race. It's really the only thing in its category, but it still has a massive following because it's so wildly different from everything else on the track. The IRC is kind of like that to me, but it's a little bit more of a serious car compared to the Dacia Logan. This is... It's something that I really hope does not go away from the Bathurst 12-hour, and it's something that I really hope gets a little bit more time in the sun, because this one looks like it's in Trans Am configuration. So I wouldn't be surprised if this has done a few like Trans Am TA2 races. But I love these Australian domestic cars, and it's apparently a joy to drive from the people that have driven it before. It has driver adjustable ABS traction control and paddle shifting, independent front and rear brakes, and some spare brakes, front and rear modular chassis crash structures, 18 by 11 wheels, multiple interchangeable body styles available. So I'm guessing this car has possibly the Ford or Mercedes body that comes with it, so you can convert it. And my personal favorite IRC GT model, it's got to be the Camaro because that's the classic version. But other than that, they revealed the Aston Martin DBR9 version from, I think it was the beginning of last year that they revealed that. I don't believe it's raced yet, but it is an absolutely gorgeous car. So I believe this has like a spare Mercedes C63 body to go with it. It's got several upgrade packages available, a whole lot of spares. It has incredibly low running costs, and it's amazing for amateur drivers. That's mainly the audience that race it in the invitational class of the Bathurst 12-hour. But these cars I really hope don't go away from Bathurst, because they're trying to turn it into a GT3 only format, which would part of it's good, part of it's bad. We'll get back to that later. But these cars I really hope stick around in Australia for the next for the foreseeable future, because they are really just the coolest domestic GT cars that Australia has, and they really need their own series that's not like an IRC series where each team gets one of these cars and can choose to make it look like a Camaro, a Mustang, a Mercedes C63, or an Aston Martin. That would be awesome. It would essentially be like what NASCAR does with the truck series. You have the same engine, same innards of the car, so to speak, and you could just put a different body on it from Chevy, Ford, Toyota, or now Ram. I think that formula is a very good one when it comes to looks and cost effectiveness, which is why I really hope this sticks around, and I really hope it gets its day in the sun at Bathurst still every year, because these cars, I bet, draw a lot of that crowd because they are so wildly different to anything else in the paddock. When we come back, I mentioned it just a few moments ago, we're going to talk about potential changes that are coming to the format of the Bathurst 12-hour, courtesy of the event promoter, which is the V8 Supercars Championship. Interestingly, because it's not a V8 Supercars round. We will be back in a little bit after this song break. You're listening to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. Here's Already Gone by the Eagles.
Don't go away. Cars and Coffee will be right back on 91.3 WHJE. Hi. If you're listening to this, that means you're listening to a replay of today's show. I just want to say thank you for listening, and make sure to subscribe to the This Week in Racing YouTube channel so you never miss another episode of Cars and Coffee, along with highlights from your favorite motorsport series. If you're listening on the WHJE website, go to youtube.com/@TWIRvids. If you're listening to this on YouTube, just click the button below. Thank you so much for listening. Now, let's get back to the show. We now return to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE.
Welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. Our final segment of the week will revolve around changes made to the Bathurst 12-hour format, or potential changes made to the Bathurst 12-hour format for the 2027 edition of the race. The Maguire's Bathurst 12-hour could become a GT3 only race by as early as next year, according to event director Shane Rudzis. This comes after the event organizers announced that the GT4 Australia Series would run a support event for the 2027 edition of the race, leaving the single GT4 entry from this year's race with an interesting choice. Would you want to race in the prestigious 12-hour with no competition and be the only car in your performance bracket, or race other GT4s in a support race? If the GT4s leave the 12-hour, that would leave the 30-odd GT3 cars and however many domestic teams show up in the Invitational class with whatever weird cars they show up with. This year, the Invitational class was made up of just 2 teams, a single KTM Crossbow and a single Mark IRC Camaro, the car we mentioned in the previous segment. With the GT2 formula, the KTM's rule set, gaining manufacturer attention in Europe from the likes of Mercedes, Maserati, and KTM and Audi, and Mark Cars still putting out ridiculous new vehicles, I believe it's in the promoter's best interest to keep these quirky vehicles in their own class to attract their cult followings to the race and have an element of traffic for the leading GT3s. I can't think of a way to attract more Mark teams or GT2s at the moment, but I believe if you let them enter, they will. This way, Bathurst doesn't become just another GT3 race, and it kind of loses its unique factor. The weird thing about the GT4, the single GT4, is that not only is it the only car in its category, it's the only GT4 car, even the invitational cars aren't in the same performance bracket as the GT4. They were both faster than the single McLaren Artura that took part in the race. It is worth noting that the McLaren was set to have competition in the form of a single Aston Martin GT4, but that car suffered a crash in practice and was unable to be repaired before the race, and so withdrew. I like the idea of getting rid of the GT4s because, like the Porsche Cup class from before COVID, I think it was just a field filler category. You don't need that anymore, especially post-COVID. You're going to have 30-some GT3 cars show up every year. I would like to keep the invitational cars, though, mainly for the reasons that I said in the previous segment. It's Australian domestic racing. At least with these Mark cars, it's home teams showcasing whatever crazy machines that they're building. And I'm just very fond of the GT2 formula, except for the fact that it's not in the same like performance order as GT3 and GT4, because you have GT3, which is like the premier Grand Touring racing class across the entire world now. Then you have GT2, which is slower, but it has a higher ranked number. GT2s used to be faster than GT3s, but when they were resurrected, they are now slower. And then below GT2s, you have GT4s. It's not in a good order for trying to explain the hierarchy of GT cars to people. Eventually, I will make a video, like a beginner's guide to GT racing for the YouTube channel where I upload all these videos. If you want to know where that is, if you've missed a part of the show, here's how you can find us on YouTube.
Want more racing news and highlights along with full show replays?
241.428 miles an hour.
Head over to the This Week in Racing YouTube channel so you never miss an episode of Cars and Coffee and highlights from your favorite racing series. Just go to youtube.com/@TWIRvids.
That's how you can find us on YouTube if you missed any part of the show or want to go back and listen to previous shows while you do whatever you do throughout your day. But I'd love to keep the invitational cars. Like, if you look at GT2 Europe has it's been gaining popularity over the last couple years. It had a couple like really lean years, but now it has some true manufacturer attention. You have Ginetta, you have Maserati, you have Lamborghini and Ferrari running their one-make cars. That's allowed. You have Ligier, you have KTM, you have Audi, you have Mercedes-AMG, Porsche makes a GT2 car. They have all of this attention now. And I think it's going to start over the next couple years, trickle into Australia if you let it. And I think having a GT3 and GT2 format for the Bathurst 12-hour is better than having, GT3, GT4, GT2, invitational cars, Porsche Cup cars. Like, that's too much. You can do that at the Nürburgring, where you can get a solid field for all kinds of cars. But for Bathurst, I think you're going a bit overboard. If you take a look at, I think the best way to go about this is you have the 3 GT classes, or technically 4. You have GT3 Pro, Silver, Pro-Am, and Bronze for different kinds of driver combinations. Those are roughly in the same performance bracket. They will fall off the lead lap over the course of the race. At least the amateur cars will, just because the amateurs are slower. That's just how it works. But you have a bit further back, you have the GT2s, and I think you can throw these marked cars, like the IRC GT and all of the other variants of it, into the GT2 class because they're able to now. The IRC GT, at least in practice, we didn't really get to see the IRC compete with the KTM crossbow because the KTM crashed very early on in the race, actually under the safety car for Christopher Mees vaporizing a kangaroo. We didn't really get to see the invitational car battle play out, but in practice, their times were very similar. So I would lean towards keeping GT3 as is, removing GT4 because only one team showed up, or only 2 teams showed up, one team started. Make that a support race, so that GT4 teams, if they want to race at Bathurst, still have a way to race at Bathurst. And then you have the invitational cars for whatever Australian team decides to run a car, or whatever team can get a GT2 car in, like the KTM, or maybe in the next year we'll see Maserati come in, or Ginetta, or Ligier, or one of these cheaper alternatives to GT racing, and hopefully we'll get to see this invitational class prosper a little bit. I really hope it does, because those are my favorite cars. The really quirky cars that don't fit into any other class. Those are my favorites in any sports car race. But that'll be it for this weekend's edition of Cars and Coffee. We will be back right here next week at 11:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. Thank you for listening. I'm going to go watch the Cup race. I'm going to make a pick. I'm going to make a pick for a Cup race. I think Christopher Bell goes back-to-back. I don't think that pick's rooted in anything, but I need to get back into the habit of making picks so I can have stuff for people to interact with on the Instagram. So I think I'm going to go with Christopher Bell to win the Auto Trader 400 at Atlanta later today. Thank you for listening to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. We will be right back here again next Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Here's Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.